What if you could actually make hard work feel as addictive as checking your phone? I know, it sounds kind of impossible, right? But the key isn't about more willpower. It's about a huge misunderstanding of how our brains actually get motivated in the first place. So today, we're going to deconstruct that science and learn how to make effort feel incredible.
All right, first things first, let's get one thing straight about dopamine. Most of us think of it as the reward chemical. You know, the pleasure hit we get after we do something great. But the science, it tells a totally different story. Dopamine isn't really about the reward itself. It's all about the anticipation of the reward. It's a prediction signal.
This one sentence, honestly, it changes everything. See, your brain is constantly running this little program in the background, asking, was that worth it? Should I do that again? And dopamine is the answer. It tracks the difference between what you thought was going to happen and what actually happened. And this little detail is the key to everything we're about to talk about.
Okay, so if it's all about prediction, well, we've got a bit of a problem. Because for most of us, our brains have learned to make some pretty negative predictions about hard work. Let's dive into how this system is basically wired to work against us before we even begin.
So here's how that learning loop works. When an experience turns out to be way better than your brain predicted, you get this awesome spike of dopamine. And that spike is like a little bright yellow sticky note your brain slaps on that memory that says, whoa, pay attention, this was good, do this again. It's an incredibly powerful signal to repeat that behavior.
And yeah, the opposite is just as powerful. If something is worse than you expected, a task is way more boring or harder than you thought it'd be, your dopamine levels actually fall below the baseline. Your brain learns instantly, nope, that was a raw deal, avoid that in the future. The correction is immediate and really strong.
So let's just apply this for a second. When you think about sitting down to do something genuinely difficult, what prediction has your brain already locked and loaded? For most of us, it's already decided the whole experience is going to be slow, boring, and just hard. So before you even type a single word, your brain is bracing for a bad time, and you're fighting an uphill battle against your own predictions. And this brings us right to that classic piece of advice. Just do it. Just force yourself. We're told to grind it out with willpower and discipline. But when you understand dopamine, you see why that whole strategy is just a short-term, exhausting trap that is pretty much destined to fail. You can think of willpower as a manual override for your brain's automatic prediction system. You're using brute force to go against the current. And yeah, you might win for a little while, but you're not actually changing the underlying prediction. You're just fighting it. And that fight burns a ridiculous amount of energy.
And that's the bottom line. You just can't override the system forever because willpower is like a battery that runs out. Prediction, on the other hand, that's structural. It's part of the brain's fundamental wiring. So to make a real, lasting change, you can't just fight the structure. You have to rebuild it. You have to change the prediction itself.
So if just pushing through isn't the answer, then what is? Well, the great news is that we can actively rewrite our brain's expectations. So let's get really practical here and walk through a 4-step framework to do exactly that. Okay, here's our roadmap. It's a 4-part plan. First, we're going to create a dopamine spike before we even start. Second, we're going to remove the brain's natural resistance to unclear effort. Third, we'll give it constant feedback that things are going well. And finally, we'll use a little unpredictability to get it hooked on the process.
All right, step 1 is all about building a ritual. And this is not about rewarding yourself after the work is done. No, this is about signaling a reward before it even begins. By using the exact same cue every single time, maybe it's a specific song, a quick stretch, or taking that first sip of coffee, you build this powerful association. Your brain starts to learn that this cue predicts a good experience, and that creates an anticipatory dopamine spike that literally pulls you into the work.
Next up, we have to remove what's called the uncertainty cost. Here's the thing. Your brain doesn't actually mind effort as much as it absolutely hates unclear effort. A vague goal like, I'm going to work for 2 hours, feels awful because the end is fuzzy. But a tiny, super specific, guaranteed goal like, I'm just going to open the file and write 3 lines, well, your brain can easily predict completing that. And that little prediction of a guaranteed win creates its own momentum. Okay, step 3. Your brain desperately needs feedback. Without constant signals that you're moving forward, it just assumes you're failing, and it starts to cut off the dopamine. You have to make your progress impossible to ignore. Use checklists you can physically tick off, a timer that's counting down, a progress bar. Honestly, even just seeing your pen move across the page is a powerful visual signal that tells your brain, hey, we're winning. Progress itself becomes the reward.
And finally, step 4. Now we're going to reward the process, but not in a predictable way. See, a reward that comes at the exact same time every single day loses its punch, but a variable reward, where sometimes you take a break after 20 minutes, sometimes after 45, maybe sometimes not at all, that forces the brain to pay way more attention. It can't figure out the pattern, so it stays engaged, and it starts to get hooked on the process of working, not just the final outcome.
So when you start combining these 4 steps and you do it consistently, something really incredible starts to happen. You build this brand new, powerful dopamine loop. And the effort of hard work stops being this thing you have to push through, and it starts becoming something your brain just automatically pulls you toward.
If you only take one single thing away from all of this, let it be this right here. The entire strategy boils down to shifting that reward signal from the very end of the task to the very, very beginning. You are literally engineering a feeling of reward into the first 5 seconds of starting.
And this creates such a profound shift in how you experience work. We are all conditioned to believe that the good feeling comes from finishing. But with this method, the best part of the whole process actually becomes starting. And when starting feels good, procrastination just kind of melts away, and that motivation loop starts to run all by itself.
The change is just so dramatic. The old way feels like you're trying to push a giant boulder up a steep hill. It's this constant grinding fight against resistance. The new rewired way, it feels like gravity. It's an automatic, natural pull toward the thing you need to do, and it requires no force, no inner debate.
So I'll just leave you with this question. Just imagine for a minute what you could accomplish if the things you know you should do felt less like this heavy pressure you have to bear and more like an effortless force of nature just pulling you forward.